Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, January 21st. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see not a whole lot going on. A low, part of a gale that was previously in the Gulf of Alaska, is fading, generating 20-foot seas, pushing almost into Cape Mendocino and down towards central California. And swell from a previous low off Japan is working its way towards Hawaii, but neither are particularly remarkable. As usual, we'll start this week's tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When they do form, helps direct their track. We're looking for a trough. That is a dip in the jet going to the south. We don't see that anywhere. Sort of maybe right here, but that's a very minimal dip, if at all. Anyway, what this dip or this trough does is help support a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the surface. And of course, that's the hallmark of low pressure. Low pressure generates wind, winds generate seas, and when those seas radiate away from the fetch area, produce swell, and that swell, when it impacts your beach, of course, makes surf. So, the jet stream looks pretty good coming off Japan, was at 160 knot winds, but notice it doesn't hardly get off the coast, and part of the energy peels off here, and that means the jet is splitting, heading up north into who knows where. Then the jet continues to the dateline, and it splits again, with part of the energy heading down to the equator, the rest of the energy moving through the Gulf of Alaska, and then whatever energy peeled off initially over the Kuril Islands returns in the Gulf of Alaska, adding a little bit of energy here, but the jet's just basically very fragmented, and with that, that means not much wind energy is present and not much energy to help support gale formation. Let's put this into motion. As we roll out, and we'll sort of spoil it right now and say not a whole lot's going to change over the next week. Okay, see the split continuing, energy pushing off to the north there. Now we do see a little bit more return energy and winds picking up in the Gulf on Tuesday to 150 knots. And this downward push, that really helps. That's what gets low pressure going. If the wind energy was on the opposite side of the trough, that wouldn't be so good for storm development. But there you go. Pretty decent looking trough setting up off of Oregon on Wednesday. That should support gale formation. That trough moves inland over, let's say northern California, Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And then behind that, a little bit of a ridge tries to build, but actually it almost looks like secondary energy sweeps down the coast into or at least into northern California, into late Thursday night, and then the ridge starts building in earnest. That is, this sort of pushing north of the jet, and that supports high pressure down at the surface. Now notice, a little bit of a trough again trying to develop, but all the energy's on the wrong side of the trough come, let's say, early Saturday. And again, the big split just happens here off Japan, even though wind energy up to 190 knots at that time, and we're into Sunday a week out, and where are we? There we go. There's the end of the run. The jet still kind of fragmented, splitting, doing strange stuff, all trying to come together, pushing into, we'll call it anywhere from Vancouver down into Northern California, something like that. Maybe possibly supporting a little bit of, certainly weather into Canada, not so much probably for the U.S. West Coast, and certainly not a whole lot to support gale formation, nothing out in the Dateline region. Maybe just a little bit right here off the Kuril Islands. That doesn't do much for hardly anybody. Let's go take a look down at surface level pressure and winds. And here we go. Everything is pretty much as expected. Surface level pressure, surface level winds, a little bit of low pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska, and then pretty much nothing anywhere else. So we'll just roll this out looking for something, and there we go. Come Monday, low pressure, gale low, 45 knot winds developing off Japan, and something trying to start organizing in the Gulf. These are the twos area right here. Remember, the jet's well consolidated, powerful right here, but splits right about there. Then they've got that return flow from the jet, the northern branch falling down in here, and that, sure enough, there we go. Pretty decent, almost a storm, 55 knot winds in little pockets, but on the wrong side of the low, on the north side, aiming back at the Kuril Islands. We really want it on the south side. That would push fetch towards Hawaii. Also, some sort of a low on the dateline here, and then our low again in the Gulf on Tuesday. Watch this. So here's our Gulf low Tuesday night, 30-35 knot winds aimed at the U.S. West Coast, but in very close proximity. That typically makes for pretty ragged swell, except into Southern California. They're a bit more protected. Low pressure over the date line. This originally was supposed to have fetch in the south quadrant, but notice, we'll pull this away here for a second. There's almost nothing in the south quadrant. All the energy is in the north quadrant. That is pushing back at Japan. You roll this out, and you get some 30-knot winds on Wednesday, maybe something for Hawaii with luck. The gale sets up again off of Oregon, 45-knot winds over a tiny little area, and then fading into Wednesday night. Still some fetch out here into Thursday. Broad low pressure off Japan, but no real winds of particular interest associated with it. High pressure builds off the U.S. West Coast Thursday night. Oh, another new little low seeps into the picture. This wasn't here on the previous run of the model. Again, targeting mainly Vancouver, not so much anywhere else. So high pressure over the U.S. West Coast come Friday night. Roll this out, and nothing really going on. There's 35-knot winds, but all aimed to the north at Russia. And where are we? A little bit of a low pressure in the Gulf. A week out, Sunday night. 35-knot winds aimed at the U.S. West Coast, and that's about it. So one would say, what's going on here? We had bombing surf, strong storms a week ago. Now everything's falling apart. Well, that's all to do with the MJO. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Let's go take a look down and see what effect these winds have on the ocean surface, though it seems pretty obvious. And here we are, significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. You look at the whole chart, the only thing of any interest is 20-foot seas, maybe 21-foot seas, pushing into Oregon right now and getting ready to sweep down the California coast, pretty much from a rather northerly direction relative to Southern California. That swell impacts the California coast Sunday night into Monday, and then fades out from there. New gale develops off Japan, as we saw. What's that, 45-foot seas? And they sort of, supposedly up to 50 foot, but aimed pretty well to the north. Great circle tracks into Northern California are like this, so maybe some energy. But relative to Hawaii, most of this energy's not pushing at Hawaii. We're not expecting a whole lot of swell from this. This will do more on, was this Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, tiny area 26-foot seas, again pushing at the U.S. West Coast in close proximity. A little bit of seas here trying to develop from the low on the date line, but notice most of the seas are in the northern quadrant aimed away. Then this other little low developing off Japan on Wednesday night, 26-foot seas pushing off the coast, targeting Hawaii. That has some hope for producing swell. Also, seas continue off of the Pacific Northwest. And then things sort of settle down. Not a whole lot going on. Tiny little low with, 22, 23-foot seas a week out on Sunday, sort of aimed at the U.S. West Coast. We get some swell from that. And that is about it. Oh yeah, wind swell looks like for Hawaii from this, whatever this is, a mixture of high pressure and low pressure. Really, a pretty quiet pattern is in the offing. Let's go back in time. So when were we? Tuesday. So we're about, 5 days ago or more, 6 days ago. Small low developed north of Hawaii, moving east rather quick. This is the storm that made rather giant surf along the Pacific Northwest coast and into California. Large swell hit Mavericks. There you can see it develop. 45-foot seas at 06Z last Wednesday, building to 48 feet at 12Z. Building to 49 feet just off the Cape Mendocino coast, 18Z on Wednesday, 49-foot seas aimed, and what is that? 135 west is about 600 miles off the San Francisco coast, so very close by. Seas going up to 50 foot that evening. We know what that swell did. Large, raw energy. Then another system developed off Japan last Thursday. It produced, here we go. There we go. What's that? 43. Yeah, 43, 44-foot seas. That swell is in the water right now, pushing towards Hawaii. Also, a little low developed in the western Gulf on Friday, working its way across the Gulf, never getting more than about 32 or 33-foot seas, and then sort of trying to reorganize today in the eastern Gulf, and that's where we are right now. That swell is poised to hit let's say California, Central California, North California, but not with particularly good quality. And that is it. So there are two swells in the water. Small one off Japan, bound for Hawaii. raw, larger swell for California. Probably not real rideable, except maybe in exposed breaks in Southern California. Then let's zoom in real quick, take a look at winds. We see trades over Hawaii, but here is this low developing in the Gulf. Southwest winds or south winds already in effect, Cape Mendocino. Forecast to work their way down into, let's say, San Francisco by tomorrow morning, Monday morning, then dissipate. High pressure tries to set up. Notice trades continue for Hawaii into Monday. New low building in the Gulf. We get into Tuesday. Still light winds here in California, but a new front off the coast. South winds building into Cape Mendocino and southward to about San Francisco by Tuesday night. Trades continue for Hawaii. Next front works its way down the coast, impacting California. There's south winds ahead of the front, northwest winds behind it on Wednesday, and then a lighter wind regime, but more northwesterly on Thursday. Stronger, clearing high pressure builds behind. The same high that was building trades for Hawaii now is going to start driving northwest winds on Friday. Mainly, though, for Point Conception, not too bad to the north. And by Saturday, notice the high ridging inland, light winds down from, let's say, San Francisco up to maybe Cape Mendocino. Another front trying to push in there. Does it make it any further south? Nope, the high holds it off. And I think that's about where we end up with a offshore flow come, was that Sunday, starting Sunday for the U.S. West Coast, continuing into Monday, and sort of a mixed low pressure here, high pressure gradient, northeast wind situation, and a light Kona flow for the Hawaiian Islands as we get into Sunday and Monday. And then a quick look at precipitation for California. Not so much for Hawaii. California needs water. We see a front, of course, working its way down the coast, moving into San Francisco Monday with rain. Maybe some light precipitation into Tahoe. How far south it makes it? Nowhere. Probably not much further south than Tahoe. I think we saw maybe an inch or two of snow in the models. Things dry up. Next front winds up off the California coast. There it is. Pushing into Cape Mendocino. More precipitation. Probably a better precip producer. This one come Wednesday. Look at that. Pushing down the coast. And then pretty strong into Tahoe by Wednesday night, and working its way down towards at least the central Sierra into the southern Sierra. So Mammoth should get something from that as well as we get into Thursday. A little bit of background energy continuing through Friday. Then things dry out. High pressure takes control, and that is it. So one pretty solid snow producer. Let's go take a look at some of the data. So we'll focus on Tahoe. This is snow forecast models from our snow forecast section. As we can see, snow starting to work its way into the Tahoe area. You can count the totals here depending on your resort of interest. Starting 1 a.m. Monday, a little bit more into maybe 7 a.m. and then things fade off. Total precipitation or snow accumulation, 1 to 2, maybe 3 inches at Kirkwood, Squaw, Sugar Bowl. Those are resorts on the crest. Those not on the crest, considerably less. Then we roll this out. Not a whole lot goes on. So this is from the NOM model, 3-hour increments. Only goes out 84 hours. But you can see the next system starting to move in Wednesday afternoon. And by 4 p.m. Wednesday, looks like a solid amount of snow. This is the 3-hour forecast peak snow in the snow pocket here. 9 inches in a 3-hour interval, but that's not at any of the resorts. But then look at that. Oh, we'll pull this away. 8.65, somewhere between Squaw and Kirkwood at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. And then, we're at the end of the model. So that second batch looking like a good foot of snow or more. And we'll do this. Now we're looking at the GFS model, the same event, the Wednesday event. This is in 6-hour intervals, not nearly as detailed, but it sort of paints a little bit of a picture. Snow into Wednesday, backing off, then pulsing again on Thursday. Not so bad. Continued snow into about 10 a.m. Friday. Total accumulations on the crest, we'll say 16 to 18 inches. And even into some of the low North Star with 13, 14 inches, something like that. So not a bad event. And here's the totals on the chart for squaw. You can look down here. Yeah, 16, 18 inches total, but really no accumulation after about 4 a.m. on Friday. You see, oh, one little patch, maybe 1.3 inches out Tuesday. That gives you that. Here's the chart for Kirkwood. Very similar. What's that? 17.4 inches. And then Mammoth, here's the chart. You can look down. Here we go. 5.5 inches total for the whole 10-day window. And all this is really attributed to La Nina. We'll talk about that now in the long-term outlook, looking at the MJO and ENSO, El Nino Southern Oscillation, and its impacts on surf and precipitation long-term. So the first part of our discussion, we'll look at the MJO, Madden-Julian Oscillation, a periodic weather cycle that travels from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, and when in the active state, feeds the jet stream, helps support storm formation, and when in the inactive state, does exactly the opposite. So we look for signs of the MJO by looking at winds on the equator, in the Kelvin wave generation area, we call it. The area from 135 east to 170 west. The date line's right there. This is New Guinea here, and we're just on the equator, 5 degrees north and south, and in this box from 170 west to 135 east. You look at, these are actual wind speeds across the entire equator, and you can see they're from the east, pretty strong over the entire area, but it's anomalies, the differences from normal for this time of year. You see that, yeah, winds are lightly more to the east, well east of the Kelvin wave generation area, but in the Kelvin wave generation area, right in here, very strong from the east, much stronger than normal. That is a classic sign of the inactive phase of the MJO. And next up, we look at the forecast. So this is all the wind, only the east-west component of the wind, whether it's blowing more out of the east or more out of the west, and these are the anomalies. So whether it's stronger from the east or west, and only the area we're interested in is between this tick mark and this tick mark. That is roughly the Kelvin wave generation area. And you can see blues, purples are easterly anomalies. Starting January 1st, we were in the inactive phase of the MJO, and you're going, well, how could we have the giant surf that we had with the inactive phase of the MJO in control? And by big surf, I'm talking a week ago or less. And you do see a bit of an incurgence here of westerly anomalies into the Kelvin wave generation area. But the upper atmosphere, the jet stream, as soon as the MJO goes inactive or active, everything doesn't change. It's a big boat. It takes a while to turn. So even though we started in the inactive phase, we'll say around January 6th, the atmosphere isn't really starting to turn until right about now. And notice we had another very solid push of easterly anomalies the past week. That likely is what's tearing the jet stream apart. And with the jet stream split, there's no energy available to support gale formation. And you saw where we're at. Anyway, the good news from this is Kelvin wave generation area is right in this area here. So here's where we are today. And the good news is those easterly anomalies are forecast to weaken and forecast to almost move out of the Kelvin wave generation area. There's the eastern boundary, so that'll be out of here almost a week from now. And you also see westerly anomalies forecast to start moving in from the west. That suggests that perhaps this inactive phase of the MJO will be short-lived, and the active phase might come back to visit us a week out. So let's take a look at the outgoing long-wave radiation models. So these basically measure the amount of sunlight reflectivity coming off the ocean surface. More reflectivity, higher positive values, like there, suggests high pressure, suggests the inactive phase of the MJO. Okay, and we know that to be true. There's the date line right there. Kelvin wave generation area is, we'll sort of put a box right along in here. Still, inactive phase in control, but this, per the statistic model, says a week out, inactive phase is supposed to all be gone. The active phase, blue here, less sunlight reflectivity, meaning more clouds, meaning low pressure. Active phase of the MJO, moving into the West Pacific a week out, and pretty much in control 2 weeks from now. So that's not too bad per the statistic model. And then the GEFS model, dynamic model, says pretty much the same thing. So, two models in correlation. That gives us some hope. Next up, we look at phase diagrams. Assume you're looking down on the North Pole. The MJO active phase moves from west to east from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent through the West Pacific under the U.S. West Coast, across the Atlantic, back to Africa, and round she goes. The heavy dot is where the active phase is right now. Maritime continent, we'll say roughly Bali. Here's the forecast for the next 2 weeks. The stronger the dots are away from this center, the stronger the MJO is. This, the ECMF model, says moderately strong active phase of the MJO moving into the West Pacific 2 weeks from now. That looks pretty good. The GEFS model, a little bit more, not quite as positive. With the MJO, not quite as strong, not moving as far into the West Pacific, but still in reasonably good proximity and likely supportive of a stronger jet stream flow. Upper level precip model, the green suggests areas favorable for precipitation. This runs about a week or so ahead of what actually happens down at the surfaces way up at the jet stream level. But right now, suggesting already favorable conditions for precipitation moving in over the maritime continent, starting to move into the West Pacific. This is basically the active phase of the MJO. You can see it slowly easing its way across the Pacific through about February 20th. So one would say as we get into the early parts of February, things should start waking up in the Pacific again. That's not too far from now. But then, just as, it's a cycle. MJO is a cycle, and cycles come and go, wax and wane. So as we move into, first week of February, so inactive phase then sets up, and it makes its cycle across the Pacific. And while it's doing that, the active phase again tries to set up and build in the West Pacific as we get into the early part of March. So this again correlates pretty well with what we've seen in the other models. And then finally, the CFS model, upper level winds, or actually winds at the 850 millibar level, about 4,500 feet. Good, reasonable representation for what's going on at the surface. And so this is past performance down here, and then this is what's coming. And just looking right now, here's where we are. The blues are easterly anomalies. This is the and Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks, so about from here to here. Easterly anomalies in control, but not for long. And then you look forward and you see nothing but, for the most part, yellows, which is westerly anomalies, which is generally more favorable for storm production and more favorable for the jet stream. Let's overlay the MJO. Yep, as expected, dotted contours are the inactive phase of the MJO, in control for now, but let's see, date line's right about there. So about a week from now, the inactive phase moving out, active phase moving in. There's your westerly anomalies. That's a good period for swell production through about, end of February almost. And then the inactive phase sets up. But even when it does, notice in the Kelvin wave generation area, right around in here, not like this at all. Very light easterly anomalies, some westerly anomalies, and then as we get into April, active phase shows up again. But by that time, we're pretty much moving out of winter months. The MJO has less and less of an effect on the jet stream in the northern hemisphere. We might even start looking at the southern hemisphere in this time frame to see if this active phase has any positive impact. In this last chart, just doing a quick look and see what's happening with the MJO. This doesn't tell you where the MJO is. It just tells you if it's red and positive above the line, that's the active phase of the MJO. And we've had a pretty good run of active activity. Not strong, but at least consistent. Better than back here last spring and summer and fall, where the MJO was basically sound asleep. Things woke up in, November or so? And we've kind of been on a little roll since then. Now, you wouldn't know it because this is interacting with La Nina. La Nina sort of dampens the impacts, but to us, it sort of suggests maybe we're on the downside of La Nina. All right, so let's take a look at the ocean, in the ocean, down deep in the ocean, see what's going on. This starts setting us up more for the La Nina, El Nino discussion. Currently, right now, actual water temperatures, so this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. We're looking down 200, 300, 400 meters. It's 300, so what's that, about 900 to 1,000 feet down. These are the anchor lines off the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equatorial Pacific used for monitoring El Nino. They also have sensors on those anchor lines, and that helps us determine a subsurface temperature profile. So 29 degrees balled up in the west, and a shallow area of warm water in the east. It's not the actual temperatures that matter, though they do. It's the differences from normal that matter. And there has been a significant positive development in the past week. And you can see this. This whole area here in the East Pacific was filled with 1 centigrade below normal temperatures. That's quickly getting erased. And you see this finger of warm water 2 degrees above normal, and now a pocket of it here. This suggests that a Kelvin wave has developed from the active phase of the MJO that was back in December. It's moving. This warm water is moving steadily off to the east. There's not enough cold water here to block it. We're watching this line right here. It was 2 weeks ago, is back here. It's just moving its way closer and closer and starting to eliminate the subsurface pool of cool water that's been advecting to this, or been drawn to the surface by stronger than normal trades, and helping to basically fuel La Nina. Here's another view of that. This runs a little bit behind. This is the 13th of January, but you can see here's the, we'll call it the a Kelvin wave produced by westerly anomalies during the active phase of the MJO in the Kelvin wave generation area. So this is looking very much like a Kelvin wave. Pieces of warm water working further and further off to the east. Here's the cool pool. It is, so yeah, if you have east trades blowing here, that's sucking this warm water to the surface, creating a surface cool pool, and that does all sorts of things to mess up the jet stream, and that's why La Nina is not favorable for storm development, and El Nino does just the opposite. You have a lot of warm water over here made by successive Kelvin waves and much active MJO activity pushing warm water off to the east, but it looks like that this area of cool water is getting less and less coverage daily. Here's past performance. What's going on? West Pacific here, East Pacific here. Last year, warm water, a couple of Kelvin waves actually made almost like a mini El Nino, but it wasn't. Just a bit of Kelvin wave activity. Then in August of this year, La Nina really got its toes in. Big pool of cool water developed in the East Pacific, not even much warm water in the West Pacific. And now as we're getting into fall and winter, notice warm water is building, and this is what you really want to notice. See the warm water starting to work its way off to the east, undercutting La Nina, maybe cutting it off for good. Sea level anomalies, we looked at this before. Here's South America, here's Australia, New Guinea. The area we're interested in is right down in here, specifically right here. This is the El Nino, La Nina monitoring area. See negative numbers. That means the ocean surface strip away all the waves, wind waves, the tides. You see sort of a depression on the ocean surface here. That means cooler water at depth. Okay, but the point that's interesting here is these 10-centimeter anomalies were up filling this whole area 2 weeks ago. They're retreating to the south. They're getting less and less coverage. And they're not drawing back yet, but that suggests that the cool pool that is here is lessening in aerial coverage. Likewise, pretty good coverage of positive anomalies moving across the dateline. Now, we really want to see it moving to about 140 west. We haven't seen that yet. We don't expect it, but sort of suggests La Nina maybe is losing some of its energy. So what's the effect on the surface? Well, there is some good news here too. A little bit of cool water out off of Chile and not so much off of Peru. Cool water along the immediate coast, but also warm water building off the coast. This pattern is held for about a week. Cool water here along the equator. Again, remember there's a big surface or a subsurface pool of cool water getting pulled up to the surface by trades here, but at least a temporary lull in La Nina. The trend for the past 7 days right here, yellows mean a warming trend along Chile, a little bit off of Chile, off of Peru, off of Ecuador, over the Galapagos. Almost no sign of cooling in this area. That is basically confirming the trend that we're seeing, that the cool pool is getting significantly eroded. And then the overview. You can still see, despite all the warming, there's still a pretty healthy cool flow running from the Galapagos east or westward, driven by stronger than usual trades over this entire area. Kelvin wave generation area is off in here, not so much affected by it, but still, there's a clear sign of La Nina, this kind of triangle pattern right like that. That's the hallmark of La Nina. But this looks much less defined than it was a week or 2 or 3 weeks ago. And notice there's warming all along the coast here, warmer than normal waters right in here. That is a good sign. All this points to what appears to be the demise of La Nina, though we don't want to say it because it might just be. This is part 2. We've had a good active phase of the MJO. We have a Kelvin wave developing. But right now, that's all gone. We're in the inactive phase. So maybe this is just a lull, a pulse in La Nina, and then things are going to wake up and become cold again. We'll see. So we know what's going on in the ocean, what's going on in the atmosphere. We look at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers, like we had all December into early January, suggests the active phase of the MJO. That means lower pressure over Tahiti. But now, here we go, positive numbers in the daily index setting up, suggesting the inactive phase of the MJO. We look at the 30-day trend. The 30-day trend takes some of the noise out of this, helps us to define what's going on with the MJO. You can see falling numbers through about January 9th. That means the active phase of the MJO. So now, remember, we saw some data that suggests the MJO was turning inactive, or certainly not so active, but this says atmospherically the active phase of the MJO peaked out around January 9th and was retreating just now. But still, that doesn't mean you can't have good storms, good jet stream flow, and for sure we did. But now we're moving into positive numbers, meaning the inactive phase is setting up. And then, of course, the 90-day average, which we use for monitoring El Nino, La Nina, we were positive, meaning, and not strongly positive, but 7, that's probably La Nina. The active phase of the MJO started taking the sails out of that. Now the numbers are starting to rise again, return to some sort of weak La Nina. And then finally, the ESPI index, sort of like the Southern Oscillation Index, only it's the difference in precipitation between the area north of Darwin and a broad area north of Tahiti. Negative numbers suggest the inactive phase of the MJO, meaning less than normal precipitation in this region. This was up to minus 0.8, something like that, a week ago and 2 weeks ago. And it was starting to look like La Nina was dying. Now it's falling again. This is a 3-month indicator of what's to come. So basically what this is saying is La Nina isn't over yet. It's not done. We're still going to be dry in this area. That would be right here. And that would mean that'd be pretty much dry for California. Remember, surface temperatures here, sea surface temperatures are below normal, means less evaporation, means less energy transfer into the ocean, into the atmosphere, meaning less support for the jet stream to come raging through the Gulf of Alaska and support storm formation. Now, it doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means the potential is less than normal. And with this going back down negative from minus 0.8 to minus 1, probably suggests that we're in for yet a little bit more La Nina before it gives up. And then finally, the forecast for Nino 3.4 sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. In fact, let's go look at actuals. So here's the temperature trend for the region off of Peru and Ecuador and a little bit of Chile. You can see temperatures bouncing around a lot, but you can draw a line kind of through it right there and say, minus 1 degree or so. The current value today is only half a degree below normal, but still all this, half a degree or more below normal for 3 consecutive 3-month periods suggests La Nina. Clearly we're in La Nina, but this is not the official monitoring region. Still suggests cool water in the area off the South American coast, but maybe warming. And in the official monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region from 120 west to 170 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, current value minus 7.95, 0.8 of a degree below normal, and La Nina is half a degree below normal. So we've been clearly in that domain for quite a while now. It goes off the chart, and we still are there as of right now. So La Nina still in control. The forecast right now says, in January, temperatures were 0.75 below normal. We're supposed to rise a little bit, probably as a result of the active phase of the MJO that we were just in. Temperatures may be going up to half a degree below normal. Still La Nina, but then falling off in April, again down about 0.7, 0.6 of a degree, something like that, and hanging even into next fall. This is a minority model, even though it's the main U.S. model. Most other models, and there's about 10 of them, suggest a trend moving towards neutral or even slightly above neutral as we get into next fall. So it will be interesting to see which model wins the battle for accuracy. And of course, our hopes are that the CFS model is of course wrong and that temperatures do rebound. So for right now, swell in the water, 2 swells in the water, one pushing towards Hawaii from off Japan, should arrive on Monday. Another swell arriving in California tomorrow, pretty raw, pretty rough probably up in the north central region, better further south, but nothing great. The overall pattern, you saw it, not a whole lot going on. Yes, spurious gales and lows here and there, but none of them looking optimal, all driven by a pretty poor fragmented jet stream flow aloft. At least there's some precipitation in the forecast midweek for California. Bit of snow perhaps. But looking out, long term looks better. Give it 2 weeks out or so. Jet stream should start coming together as the active phase of the MJO moves into the West Pacific, and we should be good for about a month of better storm activity. Now remember, the MJO and the El Nino La Nina sort of cycle interact with La Nina in effect. That'll probably dampen some of what the MJO is trying to do, but we sort of get the sense that maybe La Nina is on its last legs, or starting to fade, and maybe we'd like to see the tide turn in favor of stronger active phase events and them having a little bit more impact on the jet stream. A little bit too early to call it yet. We'll know the next, let's say, month or so. Anyway, that's it for this week. Get what you can when you can get it. Make the most of it. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.